all three of you on the spectacular work that you've done. If I could ask you to put your subjective hats on, because you have on the record, off the record, and on background interviews. So you have access to information. And so sitting where you sit and what you know, and as we enter the third year of this horrible war, how do each of you see an outcome? What is your view of not how this ends, but what do you expect to happen in the next year? Based on what you know as insiders. I know it's a sensitive question. I don't want you to cross any boundaries, but I think that's why everyone came here today. I'm addressing the elephant in the room.
On behalf of everyone, yeah, thank you. You want to start?
Thank you. Okay, yeah, I'll start. Thank you. Great to see you. My mic working?
Here's mine.
I think I turned it off. Right. Is it working now? Better? I'm sorry. Yeah, so I should really preface this by saying that, journalists generally work with I think the battery's dead. We've talked for too long. We worked with the present and the recent past. The future is not our business. There are many analysts who work on prognostication. I'm a very bad prognosticator historically. There's a headline that people always throw at me on social media. From 2014, I wrote an article that said no, Russia will not annex Crimea or something like that. So when I try to guess the future, I'm often wrong. But just sort of looking at some trend lines and where my sources in Kiev, what they're thinking about coming around the corner. Yes, they're all bracing themselves for whatever the peace proposals come out of the incoming Trump administration. The Trump administration, I have heard from sources on that side that there are some pretty serious, well-informed people working on a set of terms to be presented to Zelensky and to the Russian side. From what I know of those terms, I mean, some of it has appeared in the public. For example, there was an interview that J.D. Vance gave where he alluded to some of this stuff like a demilitarized zone in the Donbass that isn't given away to Russia, but isn't really under Ukrainian control either, and it's heavily fortified to deter Russia from attacking again. These kinds of things are sort of floating around in the Trump world and are indications of the kind of deal that they're preparing to present to both sides. The ideas that I know to be in the Trump world are very far from what would probably be acceptable to both President Zelensky and to Putin. So neither side would. So the proposals that seem to be coming from Trump's camp don't match at all the demands of either the Ukrainian or the Russian side. So where does that lead us? In the very short term, that leads us to quite a diplomatic dead end. And I think that's why, according to the Financial Times reporting today, Trump is now being like, actually 24 hours is a little short, give me 6 months. Because he knows that the positions are very far apart. But let's say there is some agreement reached. Both sides are very tired. The military resources are pretty close to exhausted, I think, on both sides to differing degrees. I do hear from my sources in the Ukrainian military that they need a pause to mobilize more forces, get more weapons, to train more brigades and so on. So they need this too. So I think as much as there's hesitation publicly to admit that some kind of deal needs to happen, some kind of pause in the fighting, some ceasefire is coming, that in more kind of background conversations, I've heard from a number of military officers too that they're like, we need a pause. So what does that look like? Looking now a little bit further ahead, does that mean some kind of deal, say, wherever they draw that line of demarcation, however it's fortified, whoever controls it, does that then mean Ukraine lifts martial law? internal to Ukrainian politics, that's a very important question that I know that the Ukrainian administration, Zelensky administration, is thinking hard about. At what stage do we lift martial law, and how soon after that are there processes like elections begin to be called? So under martial law, it is illegal to hold an election in Ukraine. Once you lift martial law, you need to think quite soon about holding an election. What does that look like? And there, looking ahead to trend lines, I think there is, and now we're possibly more than a year. You asked about a year, but I think, maybe end of 2025. Now we're talking maybe into 2026. I think there is a great demand in society for new political forces to emerge in the Ukrainian context that have some military background. There's so many families and so many millions of Ukrainians have been touched by the war directly, with their either having served themselves in the military or very close relatives serving. That there is, I've heard from serving politicians, there's a great demand for some kind of military party or some political force that can speak the language of veterans. So I think looking ahead now, beyond a year to a possible resumption of normal democratic political processes happening in Ukraine, I think that's something that I would look at and watch closely, and I have been. Who would those forces be? Who would be those political forces? Could it be someone like Petro Poroshenko, who has historically, staked out a pretty I would even say hardline or militaristic political positions? Could it be him? Is it someone else? So these are the things, but now we're pretty far into the future. I think in the immediate few months, everybody is just bracing themselves, like I said in the beginning, for what's Trump going to put on the table. And I think, just last point, the Ukrainian side, and I've written about this, the Ukrainian side is expecting Trump to pretty quickly be disappointed by his attempts to deal with Putin. So the Ukrainian side is looking at the next 6 months, and they see, yes, Trump is probably going to attempt some kind of reset in relations with Putin. Previous administrations in the US have done that too. Barack Obama, the famous Перезагрузка. But Trump's going to attempt that too, it's clear. The Ukrainians are looking at that and they're saying, Putin is a maniac and a liar. Trump is going to realize that sooner or later. Once he does, there will be an opportunity diplomatically for Ukraine to win Trump more commitment from Trump to support Ukraine. Is that naive? Not my position to say, but that is something that in terms of looking ahead to the next few months, that the Ukrainian administration is talking about.
Thank you, sir.
I think maybe that's where we wrap it up for now with the group. A few things. Well,